We'd like to thank Noda by M&T Bank for their generous support of this podcast. To learn more, visit trustnoda.com. Terms and conditions may apply. Hello and welcome to another edition of On the Road with Legal Talk Network. This is Laurence Colletti and I'm the host for this episode, which is being recorded from the ABA Tech Show 2021 online and virtually through the power of the worldwide internets. So joining me now, I have the chairs of ABA Tech Show. I have Roberta Tepper and Allan Mackenzie. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
We're glad to be here.
Absolutely. No, thank you for coming on. And, it's been a while. This was the last conference we went to in person last year. And, it's been, obviously the world's been through a lot and it's wonderful to see you all again. And thank you so much for making the time. But before we get started, I want to talk about leadership and how this year was much different than most years, for this year's planning. And, but first I want to just introduce you to the audience a little bit. Where are you from? Where do you work? What do you do? Why don't we start with Roberta?
So my day job is I run the lawyer assistance programs at the State Bar of Arizona. So I run programs to help lawyers be better lawyers, practice better. I run our practice management program, and I also run our member assistance program, which provides services and resources for lawyers with substance use disorder problems, stress, anxiety, and just burnout. And my team also provides support for our sections and divisions and publications.
All right, fantastic. And how about you, Allan?
I've been around for a bit, and I do consulting these days. I own a firm called Efficient.Legal, and we provide lawyers with the ability to basically have a consultant that is an independent insurance agent, if you will, to choose platforms and look at options for automating. But at the same time, I'm on call to companies like Clio and Rocket Matter and Zola and many others that to do data migrations off of existing platforms, including document migrations to the World Wide Web. So have my fingers in all kinds of pies all the time.
All right. Sounds good. So, both of you, have your finger on the pulse here of modern, innovating law firms and participate and help people run better practices. And so let me ask you this, so kind of got into it a little bit before, the last conference that we had been to in person last year was ABA Tech Show. You all are taking over. I know from our past covers, it takes sometimes more than a year to plan a successful ABA Tech Show. And so what was that like? We were all kind of hearing the rumors last year at this time that there might be this horrible thing that was going to sweep across the globe, which did. Spoiler alert to everybody. But what was that like to suddenly have a big wrench thrown in the spokes there? You didn't really know what was going on. Did you take a break? Did you jump into planning mode? What were you able to do?
Well, the tradition, and most people don't know this, is the day Tech Show ends is the day of our first planning meeting for the next year's Tech Show. And so as Tech Show 2020 wound up, we were all sitting in a room talking about exactly that. What was going to happen? Was this going to be a pandemic? Were we going to have to go virtual? And it was a long process, supported, let me just say, magnificently by our ABA staff in the law practice division, who were just hand in hand with us the whole way.
Culturally, it was the same shock that everybody else had. We were horrified. I was just so disgusted and disheartened. And how in the world could we ever pull a board together? We cloister ourselves normally 3 to 4 times a year, all together, living and breathing the planning of Tech Show, arguing with each other, running up to a whiteboard and crossing things out and making circles and lines and diagrams and saying this is how it's got to work. And Roberta and I were faced with trying to lead that with no physical presence at all. But that wasn't, that's not what happened at the beginning. We were all, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And of course, like everybody else, we weren't the only ones that objected to the idea at first. The Tech Show is an institution. It's a social event. It's the prom as Roberta puts it, it's the prom that everybody plans for all year long. And no one was going to want to hear what we had to say. It was actually the Illinois governor that clinched it for us, because they had a very limiting rule that said there would be no gatherings of over 500 until the vaccine was readily available. And when you're talking about, discussing this in April, there was very little hope of a vaccine by this time, and so we had nothing to do but to try to come up with different ways to do this. And the machinery that's been in place, that has been developed for 35 years to pull this together. The creative part is always new. The mechanics of it is fairly well written out, and everything had to be blown to the wind. And what are we going to do about the Hyatt, and what platform shall we use? So it instantly put a whole new set of question marks over everybody's head, and it was daunting at first. It was very daunting.
And for those lawyers that have not been to an ABA Tech Show, I highly recommend that you go. I got exposed to it because of all our coverage on Legal Talk Network. But just like Allan's saying here, this is decades in the making of an apparatus to bring innovations to the practice of law. And you all do such a great job about this, because you cater to everyone. So whether it's someone just walking down that path that realizes they have a technology issue, like they don't use email or something like that, you have classes for the people that are at the very beginning of that journey, but you also have classes and sessions for people that are advanced. These classes also appeal just as much to, I would say, small firms and solos as they do to, large firm partners. This information you can bring back and gear up your practice, turbocharge it. And so, you all, this is something that goes year after year. It's a lot of work. We've gotten a chance to know all the chairs, in the recent years, and see how hard everybody works and the dedication that goes into it. You're switching formats. The first time it's going to, as far as I understand, the first time it's ever been virtual online. What was the most difficult part? You said some of it was the in-person thing, but you said everybody rose to the occasion. What was the most difficult challenge bringing it to an online platform?
I wouldn't say that there was a single most challenge. I think there were several challenges for us. One of which is, at the time we started planning that this would be virtual, there had been very few virtual conferences, and the ones that had gone on were somewhat thrown together at the last minute, not necessarily the most sophisticated in their presentation or operation. But we're the ABA Tech Show. We knew we couldn't make our long timers happy or impress our first time attendees if our platform and our presentation weren't top rate. And then we had the issue of, how do we keep an audience that's going to be sitting around in their offices or in their bunny slippers, as Allan likes to say, engaged for the length of Tech Show, when they're just going to be looking at a computer screen. So our curriculum changed a bit, our presentations, the length of presentations changed a bit. We made all kinds of changes with how we pick faculty and how many faculty we have per session. So it was sort of a rolling continuum of next challenges that we just faced as we came up to them. And I don't know that there's a better way to summarize it other than to say that the board just, we put our heads down, we headed into the strong wind, and every time something flew at us, we just resolved that issue.
How did the workload compare to previous years? I'm just kind of curious. I mean, it's a brand new process, right? So I would imagine you had to sort of invent a new way of doing things, but how did the workload compare?
Roberta and I have both been on the board for some time. You don't walk in and become co-chair. You the year before you're vice co-chair, and the year before you're running the tracks and coming up with classes like everybody else, and we all work together. But here's the deal. The mechanics, as far as the larger organization is concerned, we threw the whole idea through a huge monkey wrench, because there were budgets and plans and contracts that already existed that we had to, the Bar Association had to get out of force majeure, with force majeure clauses over hotels and things. And then there was the normal process of doing, like the app for our tech show is contracted for 3 years, coming up with a new budget and running and finding a new vendor to take the whole platform, or the whole show into the cloud, required a 6-month turnaround. And that's not normal in organizations that are like the ABA. And so was the workload more? It was more for everybody, but the law practice division and the executive councils, we all had meetings with them. Everybody was sympathetic. Everyone from the existing frontline staff of the ABA to the voluntary finance directors and pulled together and supported us. And that was the only saving grace for all of this, is the whole of ABA got behind us and said, all right, we see that this has to happen. We will find a way to work it for you. So the work was there. Yes, there was a whole lot more for all of us, but the volunteerism spread like wildfire. So it wasn't just the volunteer board. It was everybody putting in harder work. And it was harder for everyone because the members of the ABA, the actual staff that help work the show, they haven't seen their offices since last March.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was just talking with Ben Shore and Josh Leperati. I hope I remember to pronounce his name correctly. They work at Microsoft, and they said that they're just now venturing back into the offices. And with some of their coworkers, the office is exactly the way they left it when they left the office almost a year ago. Still things are sitting on the desk. It's kind of an eerie thing. So I would imagine that would be very challenging. Well, let's transition into some of the content for this year. When we were perusing the schedule of events and sessions, I noticed there may have been a theme about remote work. And obviously, that would be pretty pertinent to today. Was that this year's central theme, was remote work, or what sessions were, I guess, specifically highlighted this year?
Our theme was technically together. So we really didn't want to stress the remote part of remote work. But the truth is the virtual and remote work track started last year before we had even a clue that this would happen to us. And ironically, the lawyers who were already doing virtual practice or remote practice probably fared the best during the pandemic because they were ready. So I think our if I had to say we had a central theme, it was to make people feel closer in this time of relative isolation. But we also wanted to stay relevant to the new folks that we were hoping would join TechShow for the first time. And so in addition to that virtual and remote track, we had some atypical tracks, much as we did in 2020, tracks on leadership, on diversity, on lawyer well-being, on the things that we know are important to lawyers and trying to address the pain points that were emerging as 2020 played out and 2021 started.
And it's not just TechShow, it's the industry that's been going that way. I mean, when you talk about the hurricanes that have existed over the past 6 years and how having a remote or a hosted system in the worst case, or software as a service like Clio and Rocket Matter and the rest, meant that where the firm I managed at a time was in Lower Manhattan, the basement was flooded and our data center was offline for 3 weeks. And for those of us who had something that was a hosted solution, it meant anywhere you could get an internet connection, the law firm was still in business. So in a way, COVID-19 was the penultimate test and demonstration of the change and the need for change within the law firm.
Oh, absolutely. It's been really interesting to see the legal profession really come together, to deal with the pandemic. I'd say, and I did say this on the air, a little bit ago, I was very proud of the legal profession because, it has that reputation as being kind of slow-moving barge in terms of, innovations and technologies. But everybody kind of just understood the drill and got together and figured it out. And it was amazing to see all of this come to fruition. So related question to that, because it seems like this box is now open. We're hopefully not going to go back to some of the slower ways we used to do things. You all have seen this online format of the conference take place. Now, hopefully one day we'll get back to in-person meetings. We get to see all our conference buddies again one day, hopefully. So what elements of the virtual conference do you think will remain in place when we get to that happy day when we can all see each other in person again?
It's hard to say now. I think if you had asked about TechShow 2021 as we wound up TechShow 2020, our answer would have been very different than we would have given it even 2 or 3 months later. So, it's just too soon to tell. And, we have this year's current vice chairs, Brooke Moore and Ivan Hemmons, are going to be leading the Tech Show board going forward for Tech Show 2022. They are, Brooke is one of our primary. In fact, she won the James Cain Award for Excellence in E-Lawyering for her My Virtual Lawyer platform. And so she's certainly in that space. Ivan has been in legal tech for as long as we've known him and longer. So, I don't know. I wouldn't want to predict for them and their board where Tech Show will be in 2022 or what it will look like, other than to say that we are supremely confident that whatever choice they make will be the right choice.
Well, Roberta, you stole a little of my thunder. I was going to ask you who the new co-chairs were going to be, but I have just one final question for both of you. I saved the loaded question for the very end. It's a two-parter for each of you to answer as we close the show here. So here's part A, and we're going to go. Roberta's going to go first, all right? So part A, what was the most important lesson you learned putting on this year's ABA Tech Show? And then the second part, what is your favorite app that will be featured in the 60 in 60?
Well, okay. So the most important lesson I learned was sort of a reinforcement of the lesson that I have learned throughout my life, which is you never know where life will take you. And you just have to be prepared and not be afraid to throw out the idea and see how it works. And we did a lot of that as we went forward in 2021. And as far as my favorite app that's going to be featured in 60 in 60, I'm going to say this. You're going to have to come to 60 in 60.
Oh, you're going to leave them hanging like that. All right, Allan, same question for you.
It's a tradition. So I'm a structured person, and the thing that got me, that we really had to bang out of our heads, was the arrangement of the tracks. We had an opportunity that we've never had before. We're spreading it out, over more days. And could we do more with that? And could we have, instead of 7 tracks, could we have 17 tracks? And could we have tracks on some days and not others? And could we entice a larger audience? Could we make this a plus? And what I learned from that is that Tech Show can still be, even its basic structure that everybody knows, Tech Show could be newer, bigger, brighter, different. Now, as for my, as you know, the 60 in 60 is written by the chairs and the co-chairs, and so we are also very protective of it. Let me just say that your favorite music playing apps are going to get a run for their money.
All right. That's a good teaser right there. So, well, we've reached the end of the road for this episode, but I want to thank our guests, Roberta and Allan, for joining us. Thank you so much.
More than welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please rate and leave us a review in your favorite podcasting app. We'll see you next time for another episode of On the Road with Legal Talk Network.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. Subscribe via iTunes and RSS. Find us on Twitter and Facebook, or download our free Legal Talk Network app in Google Play and iTunes. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.